In the early 1980s, my parents and I lived in Malawi, which is a small country in southeastern Africa, made moderately famous in recent years as being the supplier of most of Madonna's children. And in the 1980s, so we had these family friends, my parents had these family friends, Barry and Baltimore. They worked for the British Embassy, and they had access to this beautiful cabin on the shores of this lake, huge lake, Lake Malawi. That was what, like 5-6 hours away drive? About 4 hours drive. And so every so often we would pack up the Land Rover with the Morrises and generally one of my friends from school, and we would spend the weekend at the lake. And to say that Malawi in the 1980s didn't have a car culture in the way that America does is a bit of an understatement. You literally would see more, you were guaranteed to see more hyenas on the side of the road than cars. This is a country that when we were living there had one stoplight in the entire country, one traffic light in the old capital. People would come from miles around to just watch the lights change color. And for a block in any direction, there was a sign that said, "Caution, robot ahead." I'm not making this up. So you know, cars were not, you know, it was not a big road culture in Malawi. So you know, so one time we were driving back from the lake, and it was Barry and Valerie Morris, and my parents, and my friend Rupert, and I, and so we got a flat tire, like midway between the lake and the capital. And we'd been driving for all of this time without seeing another car on the road. So we got a flat tire, no problem. My dad and Barry got out, and they did the whole man thing, where like one guy sort of like putters around like this, and the other guy stands there and smokes a cigarette, and you know, they traded that off for a while, but it was no big deal until they realized that the spare was also flat. So here we are. I mean, with a gas station was just completely out of the question. There were no cell phones. We were stranded out there in the middle of the savannah, basically, and so while my dad and Barry were coming up with new and colorful obscenities to shout into the air and wondering what to do, they noticed these guys sort of walking up the road. It was like 4 guys coming up from one side of the highway. I mean, there were no houses around there. There was nothing. All of a sudden, there were these guys, and they didn't look especially friendly. And so my dad sort of marked them, and they turned around, and then from the other side of the street, down the road, we saw 4 more guys. It was like 6 or 8 guys coming from either side. And it was clear that they meant us no good. So Barry, he at one time had been a naval commando in the British Navy. And so he pulls out this knife, it's like this, it was like you could just like skin an elk one-handed with it. You know, he takes up a position at one side of in front of the hood of the car, just staring these guys down. My dad pulls out his little block pen knife, it's like this long, and he goes around to the back, and he's looking at the other guys, and he just said, get in the car, and stay there. Just get in the car. And these guys were not backing down. I mean, normally, you know, you have guys who are like, okay, you know, there's 6 of you, I got a knife, bring it. I mean, you know, that would be enough to dissuade anybody. But these guys were pretty confident in their numbers. And so they kept closing. And I felt for the first time, but not for the last, that razor clarity that happens in moments of crisis. When there is some people who just sort of freeze or they fall apart or whatever, but I've never been like that. I remember everything clearly. My friend Rupert was sort of, getting a little hyperventilating, but I was scared, but I was just calm, completely calm. And time in those instances telescopes. If you've ever had the misfortune to be in a car accident, when you hit those brakes and the tires squeal, the car starts spinning around, it seems to last forever. So your awareness is so heightened. So that was the space that I was in. And it was not going to end in a good way. These guys were not backing down. And then, up from the direction that we came, rolled up a little white Volkswagen Beetle circa 1972, just like he was trying to, nearly ran the guys who were coming up our way, nearly ran them over. They had to jump back and scatter, drove right around to the front of our car where the other group of guys were coming, and nearly ran them over by pulling in front, so they sort of jumped back, and out of the car climbed the biggest guy I've ever seen in my life. I'm sure in reality he wasn't that big, but the way that I remember him, he was just huge. He was this very dark man in a very crisp white shirt, and he was wearing these nice, cleanly pressed white khaki trousers. And he got out with this big booming voice, and he's like, "Hey boys, having a little spot of trouble here?" And the guys decided that the odds were no longer in their favor, especially since he had a car with which he obviously intended to run them down should they prove to be a problem. And he was just really, really cheerful, as if this was a busy park, and he just happened to stop by with a picnic basket. He was just so casual about it. "Oh, flat tire, no problem." He's laughing, he's got this big booming laugh, and he rolls up his sleeves and got these big glistening dark arms, and he actually had, and I just confirmed this with my mom right before we started tonight, he had Fix-A-Flat. But this is a country that where the phone book not only was this big for the entire country, it was that thick for the entire country, but you open the first page, and inside the cover, there were diagram directions on how to dial a rotary phone. Dial, finger. Finger in the dial. Turn until the finger stops. Repeat for subsequent numbers, right? Fix-A-Flat was not something that you would expect to find in a country where cooking oil was at a premium, and yet he had this Fix-A-Flat that was sort of like this gun thing that you stuck it in and filled it up with a sealant, and then it self-sealed, and you pulled it up like that, and which makes me think that he was kind of from the future. But obviously we were all rattled, and my dad and Barry, they had that they had the fight or flight thing going, and they were ready to fight, and all of a sudden there was no fight coming, so they were right? And this guy just acted as if everything was totally normal, shook everybody's hand, wished everybody a nice day, drove off. We did not see a single other car for the rest of the way home, and ever since then, I have believed in guardian angels. Welcome to Full Circle Storytelling. So glad that you're all here.